from the world that I'm in, complex systems, they need to have lots and lots of parts. So we've had this wonderful reductionist trend within science, and now people are beginning to say, okay, how do we actually begin putting things back together? But of course, it's not enough to have lots and lots of parts. You can have things that have many pieces, but are actually not that complicated. So you can have a crystal, which is nice and regular, but has lots of parts, or you can have a gas with lots and lots of little molecules and atoms bouncing off each other, and it's also not very complicated. So the question is, what is in between this extreme order and this extreme chaos and randomness? And that is when you have lots and lots of little pieces that interact with each other, interact in nonlinear ways with lots of feedback. And when you do that, whether or not they have regular interactions or they're embedded within a network, then you begin to have complexity, then you begin to have a complex system. And these complex systems can be biological systems, they can be social systems, everything from a society to a city to an entire civilization. It can be, you can study things at the smaller group level, you can study things at the university level. There's actually research understanding universities as complex systems. So there's all these different ways of understanding it, but ultimately the goal is to try to mathematize it. There's a great quote by Lord Kelvin, who's a famous physicist. It's enshrined on the front of the Social Sciences Research Building at the University of Chicago, which is, when you cannot measure, your knowledge is meager and unsatisfactory. So ultimately, we want to actually measure these complex systems and actually quantify them. So anyway, that's a little bit about complex systems from my perspective.
Great.
Sure.
I'm a drama professor. In fact, I'm a drama professor who, about 15, actually it's like 17 years ago, did something which, within my realm, was considered insane. And that is, I walked over to the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University and said to them, is there any room in your sandbox for a drama professor? Now you have to realize that I expected to be laughed out of the building. In fact, even more horrifying is the fact that at Carnegie Mellon University, the School of Computer Science is in one of the ugliest buildings ever constructed. I mean, it is literally a bunker. In fact, we call it the Führer bunker, except it is so ugly, even the Führer wouldn't be caught dead in this building. In fact, it was so terrifying to me that when I went into that building, I saw young people, young programmers, who had not been outside in so long that their skin had become translucent. I mean, I was terrified. So imagine my surprise when the School of Computer Science dean said to me, oh my goodness, we would be honored for a drama professor to join us. You bring a completely different point of view. You bring a completely different mindset, background, connections, and finally, we can have some Hollywood in this joint. And so thus began the drama professor who was at Carnegie Mellon University School of Computer Science from 1995 onward. Now I need a little bit of context. How many of you are aware of Randy Pausch and the great last lecture that was done? Raise your hands. Okay. Randy Pausch was my colleague. When I was at Carnegie Mellon in the School of Computer Science, there was this idea to actually bring together artists and programmers and technologists in something called the Entertainment Technology Center. But at that time, there were maybe like 3 or 4 people in the world that could head something like that up. And as much as we liked Pittsburgh, we knew Stephen Jobs was not moving to Pittsburgh. So they needed someone from the School of Fine Arts, moi, and Randy Pausch. Now the irony was that both of us were alpha males. So people were immediately taking bets as to which one of us would be found floating face down in one of the Pittsburgh rivers. And I remember when Randy and I came together, because I was a drama professor who would always love technology. In fact, my doctoral dissertation was The Making of a Futurist, the Early Life and Career of Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, the founder of Italian Futurism, the first art movement to embrace technology as the pinnacle of man's artistic accomplishment. And I remember saying to Randy, look, I've got to be honest with you. I do not know what you computer scientists do. In other words, despite my years in CS, I had to profess my ignorance. Do you know how difficult it is for a professor to admit they're dumb? And I can tell you, I just retired after 31 years as a professor at CMU. There's no greater liberation than to recognize I do not understand complexity. My life has been, for the most part, trying to deal with it. And this is going to lead, because I remember saying to Randy, I don't know what you guys do. All I know is it involves zeros and ones, and I still don't get that. And he said, well, Don, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what you drama people do, except it involves a lot of hugging and kissing. So long as you don't hug and kiss me, we'll be fine. And thus began 6 years of an amazing education, where I would listen to him talk to a technologist, he would listen to me talk to a dramatic. And when the geek would leave Randy, I'd say, okay, what's an infinite loop? And he would explain an infinite loop, because I found that very appealing. And then someone would leave me, and Randy would say, what did you mean by playing the subtext? And all of this really culminated in this experience in Orlando, Florida, when Randy invited me to a DARPA conference. Do you all know DARPA? Defense Advanced. They're like the CIA of the DOD. And for 3 days, similar to this, and is it simply irony that you are all gathered at the same day that there's a conclave of cardinals gathered in Rome? That's part of the complexity of all this. It's like planning. It was planning. So I go to this DARPA conference, and for 3 days, I have no idea what anyone is saying. And I'm literally having an existential crisis thinking, I need to go back to drama. The last day, the general in charge says, ladies and gentlemen, we've been honored over the last 3 days of having a very special guest. He's a drama professor. I got so excited. I started to look around the room thinking, oh, I'm not alone. It's like some other whack job here. And then they said he was the associate head of drama at Carnegie Mellon at 50, and I realized, son of a gun, it's me. Would Dr. Marinelli please come down to the stage? I come down to the stage. The general says to me, you're the only drama professor we know that is housed within the School of Computer Science anywhere. You've been doing it for like 3 years now. We want to know, what impact has this had on you? I didn't even have to think. I immediately said, I feel right at home. Well, the murmuring was like, oh my God, this is more serious than we ever thought. And then I had this epiphany. And I said, you know what? I have a funny feeling that I, the drama person, know more about what you do as scientists than you know about what I do. I said, I really think that for most of you, you believe that I get up in the morning and I put on a toga and I go out into the woods, raise my hand up to the heavens, and ask the muses to please instill in me inspiration. I said, that's not what I do. In fact, what I do is almost identical to what you do, and I'll give you an example. If I'm directing a play, I'm going to have the actor enter from up left. Up left is a very weak stage position as viewed by the audience. I'm then going to have that actor move center stage, a much stronger position. I want that actor to move at a certain pace. When the actor is center stage, I want the actor to look above the audience and have this epiphany. The eyes will get bigger. The actor will then cross down right, the strongest stage position, put his hands together, say these lines, and if the actor does all of those things in that particular order, then the audience should believe the butler did it. What did I just do? An if-then equation. I said, what do you guys do? You create algorithms, which are if-then equations. What's the difference? You're using math. Math is pretty solid. I'm using psychology. Mine is much more intangible. But if the actor does what he has, she has been directed, and if the audience is who I believe the audience is, then you should believe this happens. It's not an algorithm, but it's a heuristic. So in the face of my ignorance as to what a technologist does, what do I default to? I default to the intent. I default to the fact that, guess what? Those of us who are in the arts, when we create a story, a film, you name it, we're really putting together a heuristic, a cause and effect understanding. We're dealing with trial and error exercises. We're looking at probabilities. We're contemplating teleological reasoning, consequential thought. It might be one of the reasons why, after undergraduate school, when I realized that if I wanted to be a professional actor, I was always going to be cast as a short, fat Italian uncle. And I decided I needed to go into something very similar to the arts, but with a more steady income. So I chose clinical psychology. Same thing. I found myself doing exactly the same thing with humans that I was doing with the arts. I don't understand it. I'm going to be 60 years old. I still don't get it. But the fact of the matter is, I have to embrace it and deal with it and love the fact that I don't get it. Thank you. I'm done. Oh, sorry.
I'm not entirely sure how to respond to that. But, so I was wondering, I mentioned coming from the world of math, do you think there would be anything gained if you were to actually mathematize some of the things you do, which was the intent, or would something vastly important be lost?
I have had so many students in the course of my academic career that have attempted to mathematize what we do in terms of human reaction. In video games, that is really one of the keys. And the irony for me is there was an attempt in the late 19th century among actors to actually create a matrix of physical emotions. The guy's name was Del Sartre. And we presented in theater as a way of saying, no, this is not how you do it. My computer science students jumped on this. And they decided, okay, we now know what is the proper physical response in terms of an affect. And what we ended up with was classic late 19th century presentational acting technique. In other words, fear, horror. And so we would watch the games thinking, wow, it's an interactive silent movie. I think something would be lost. All right, thank you very much.